RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go. Coming up on the Payoff, Hilary Phelps and I went to college together, but I can promise you this was the longest conversation we have ever had. When we went to college together, we were both drunks. I mean, we probably, admittedly, were both fall-down drunks, and now we're both sober. She's sober more than 15 years, and her brother is Michael Phelps. That's brought her into the public eye. We talk about that a little bit. She was the best swimmer on the planet for a little while as a kid, and we talk about how that factored into her struggles and her alcoholism, and the story about her getting to the other side and what she does today to maintain her sobriety. And the way that I feel after talking to her, I hope you get some of that. She's a woman of service. She is a very attractive person. If you listen to this, you will feel the same way and know exactly what I'm talking about. So coming up is Hilary Phelps. But first, the most attractive guy on the planet, Kevin Souza.
Hi.
Oh, Hilary, you sound great.
Thank you.
That's a really good connection. Some people you will answer because we do this over the phone. We don't like to. I like the intimacy of over the phone and kind of like the anonymity. But when you when you answer the phone, it was crystal clear. It didn't sound like two tin cans, like somebody stringing them together.
Right. I still use the old school Apple plug into my phone earphones because I feel like the other ones sometimes sound a little like underwater, or they cut out more easily, or
So these are the originals, huh?
These are the original.
Mike, you hear that? This is Mike, the producer. Mike, say hi.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you. Yeah, they're great.
You've maybe listened to one or two.
Yeah, so I'm an alcoholic. I've listened to I binged them the last couple months. Seriously.
What do you think?
They're great. Well, that's why you're joking. You're like, it's not 60 minutes. I'm like, dude, I've listened to your stuff. It's great. But it's really casual. It's like an easy flow. You're really good. So I felt, really comfortable. So I feel very comfortable having this conversation.
You were nice and complimentary of us. So I want you to hang in there and you take this compliment. I was just talking to Mike and he said, how do you know Hilary? I said, well, we went to school together. And when I got sober, I got sober more than 10 years ago, and you were already, not only were you already sober, but you were already kind of like, I knew you were sober through Rebecca Pacheco, who we went to school with. And then
did I tell?
Yeah.
Did I tell her? I guess I did.
Maybe were you out there publicly, like on Twitter or something? I forget how I found out.
No, I think I reached out to you. I'm not. When I said to you the other day, there are some friends in DC who are like, we should go out for drinks, and I'm like, well, and I'm just starting to tell people because I'm coming up on 15 years, and I have this kind of, and I can share this later too, but this anyway, I think I reached out to you because I think you shared something about 5 years,
that's what
having
happened.
5 years.
No, it was before that.
Privately.
It was before that,
or a year, maybe it was a year, and I emailed you privately on DM, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been sober for 6 years, because I think I'm coming up on 15 in June, so I'm just a year. I don't know how much. You said you just celebrated 10 November.
Yeah.
So I'm just a couple of years. Yeah. And so I think I messaged and I was like, I've been sober since 2007. Congratulations. What a great journey. Here if you need anything, or something like that.
That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. So Rebecca, you're off the hook. You didn't break Hilary's anonymity. Yeah. Rebecca's got some great books out there. Check them out.
I have them. I love them.
Yeah, she's the best. So when you said that you were sober, that made me feel good. And that kind of brings us to what this whole thing is about. You revealed yourself to me, and it made me feel good, and it made me feel stronger.
Well, you were the brave one for putting it out there, and it was easier for me then to message you and say like, hey, that's amazing. Because for a really long time, and I shared this, I think before, I felt I still wasn't really comfortable. Like it still felt a little shameful. And I think, just my opinion, I think women carry a lot of shame with them. And so lately, and especially after I had connected with you about, sharing, I'm like, I don't know. But what I realized is like the people that are going to judge my story or going to think differently of me aren't my people. It's the one person that I could help. And that's when I was like, you know what? I want to be a little bit more transparent about this, because those are my people, the ones that this could make a difference, or the ones that could hear this. I mean, I know you've been in the meeting when you're like, oh my gosh, me too. And you turn around and it's somebody, not saying people admire, but it's someone that you're like, oh my gosh, I never knew you felt that way too. I'm so glad I have that. I feel okay now, or I feel better, or whatever that sentiment might be. And that's kind of where I realized like the people that are going to judge aren't my people.
Well, it's funny. There was the reading, like some of the recovery readings that we'll pick up. And yesterday was, brothers and defects, and, brothers, sisters, whatever. I mean, the thing was written forever ago, but, we really are like, and you'll go to a meeting and somebody who you don't expect to be like you at all will share something so vulnerable and revealing. Maybe somebody who's like a senator or something, where you'll be like, oh my gosh, this person is like me. And it's very, it's empowering.
100. I mean, you weren't sober in New York, right? You got sober but like in DC, that's how it is. Like there are different clubhouses, and depending on the clubhouse or meeting, you may find a senator or a judge or, somebody that and they share, and everybody's the same. The slate's clean when you walk through those doors, but it is very, it's a great connection. It's a connection like anything I've ever experienced. Is that one of, looking at another alcoholic that may have on paper seems great or has it all together. And you look at them, you're like, I did that too. Okay. I don't feel so alone. Okay. I'm okay too. It's that path of feeling sorry for yourself or feeling whatever it is, or having one of those low moments to kind of climbing back up the ladder and saying, okay, me too. I'm okay.
I said to a dude last night, it's the best locker room on the planet. It really is. It's the best. I mean, you're an athlete. Let's get into your story a little bit. So you grow up in Baltimore, correct? Or in the suburbs?
I did in Towson. So actually, yes. So we grew up in way, way, way outside in a little tiny town called Whiteford. I started swimming and I was really good, really young. And so I'm the oldest of three. And so my parents sold their dream house that they built and moved to Baltimore so we could be closer
to the pools.
To swimming, but to the pools. Mm-hmm. But so originally I grew up in farm country, and then we moved a little closer when I got older. How
did they identify that you were like a rock star swimmer at such a young age? Because you beat everybody else. You were faster than everybody else.
Well, I did summer swimming. There's summer swimming, and then there's the year-round swimming. Year-round swimming is where the really good kids go. And I started off summer swimming, and I went up. Maybe this is telling to my mom. When I got a third place trophy, and I went up, and I'm like, this isn't good enough. I want the big one. I want the big trophy. And my mom's like, well, those are year-round swimmers. If you want the first place trophy, you have to start, swim year-round. So I was like, great, sign me up. And I did. And I loved it, and I excelled, and I was really good, really young. And so kind of by default, my sister and brother started swimming because my mom and my dad were driving me to practices, and they were like, well, if we're going to sit here with her, you're going to swim too. And so I think it was just a love for the sport, and then a little bit of natural ability.
How do you see that? Yeah. That's pretty. So you have children now, right? A boy and a girl?
No, I just have a little boy.
So you just have a little boy. Okay. So he swims too, just from following you on social media. I've seen a little bit of that. How do you, as a kid, like you said something that I think is so cool, because I grew up just loving sports, and you could not keep me off the field. Do you remember like it being intoxicating, just how much you loved it at a young age?
I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved And for me, it was just the water, which is really like, now it's still a really like soothing and comfortable space. But it was, I think what it was is that I was really present. It was like the one time, I think being a kid, I was more present than I was as I got older, but I was super involved, like super in the moment, really dialed in when I was swimming, focused on what I was doing. I loved it. I love the competition. And it seemed really like wholesome. It wasn't, I don't know. Yeah, I loved it.
I was a swimmer when I was a kid, and I kind of sucked. And I loved it, but it was something about, I don't know. There was a community within the swim club I went to. I shouldn't say I sucked, but I certainly wasn't the best, but I certainly wasn't good enough where it was something I did year round. But it was a really something about going in the water, going under the water, coming up. There really is something very unique about it and very different than any other sport. And when you go to like high school, how are you, like, what's the swimming situation like? Like, are you known as Hilary, this great swimmer, or are you known as Hilary, the student?
Both. I mean, so when I was in sixth grade, when I was 12, I started doing, or 11, I started doing double practices. So I was a straight A student. As an 11 and 12-year-old, I was the fastest distance swimmer in the country.
In the country? Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty good. I made nationals at 12. I was the youngest at nationals. And I swam the mile. So I swam the mile, I swam the 200 butterfly, all the 400 IM, all of those events. And I was really good. I love the distance. I love the distance events. But I remember somebody saying, and this is kind of the change that, as I remember it, it's like, if you swam faster, you'd be better. If you studied harder, you'd get better grades. And I remember thinking at that age, but I have straight A's and I am the best. I don't know how to get better. And somewhere in my mind, it clicked to, you're not good enough.
Huh.
And I distinctly remember that moment as being oh, so what I'm doing, which is the best, isn't good enough. And at 12, I'm what do I do with that? How do I process?
What did you do with that? What happens then?
Debauchery.
So when do you start to drink?
So I actually tried marijuana first, and I didn't like it. I've never liked it. I don't know that I started. I think I was 14. And I was thinking about this because I don't know that I remember my first drink, but I remember drinking to feel accepted because everybody else was. And it was beer, because that's what, I grew up in Baltimore. It was a lacrosse town. Everybody played lacrosse. And I was kind of the odd one because I swam and nobody swam. In high school, swimming wasn't, except in some parochial schools or private schools. I went to public school. So we didn't have pools. It wasn't a thing like lacrosse or soccer or any of those team sports. And so I always felt different.
No,
different.
It's weird because going to high school, outside of Philadelphia, there were swimmers, but they had to go swim other places. And when they practiced, it was crazy early hours, or just to get the pool access. And it was kind of they weren't part of at least the way that I saw it. It was wow, they're unique in a sense. So there were not outcasts, but there was a difference, right?
Definitely. And there's definitely, because it wasn't really a cool sport, it just wasn't, it wasn't soccer. It wasn't lacrosse. It wasn't team. I mean, it was very much, you're in your head, right? You're in your head for 2 hours by yourself, up and down and up and down. And so I always felt different in that way too, because it's a different sport. Not as cool. It's not as hip, but I would hang out with the other athletes. And that's where we started drinking. It was the lacrosse guys, and they would get beer after a game, or we'd go to games and drink after. And I didn't really like it, but I wanted to be a part of. I didn't like the taste of beer.
Being a part of got me in some hot water, that whole thing, feeling for whatever reason, we don't see ourselves as we are. For me, I didn't see myself as I was. I just thought I was not good enough, like you said. Whatever. I just felt like I was less than. And when I drank, it made me feel more than or perfect or superior. So I was constantly, not only was it one, there was a camaraderie aspect to it that made me feel like I was part of the group. And two, it was intoxicating. It made me feel great. And it gave me the confidence to do, stuff I was scared to do when I wasn't drunk.
100%. Yeah. And I don't know. And it's, or I don't know if I just never felt good enough or funny enough or smart enough or pretty, like I never felt enough with anything. But when I drank, those voices quieted, or that part of my mind would just shut down and I could be whoever it was I wanted to be or whoever it was I thought I'd be. Or maybe I was still the same person, but I didn't care because I had the booze poured on top of it.
And some of the stuff is out there because of your brother, and he's a public guy. But your parents got divorced in 1994. Like, how does that affect you, and where are you at in your development?
Oh, I'm spiraling fast. Because they're separated, right? I mean, they're not living under the same roof. At that point, I'm like, I'm all in. I'm in active drinking. I'm doing, just all over the place.
What's it like, by the way, real quick, because you said active drinking, we'll get your mom in 1 second or that statement in a second, but what's it like? Give people a window inside. What kind of doors are you starting to go through as a young athlete? Because once I figured out that I could drink during the day, I was like, oh, I can do this. And I'm not saying I was drinking and falling down, but I was, checking out during the day at times. And then I figured out I could drink during a Tuesday night and get away with it. Like, what was that happening for you at all as a high schooler?
So I'm like, how much do I share? I was probably doing a little bit more drugs in high school than I was.
So you were doing so you were doing drugs.
I'm like, so we would eat mushrooms in home ec class and like bake cookies, and then I'd go to practice. I've never shared that before, so yes. And it was like, I mean, I clearly share this freely, but like, yeah. So that's what we would do. We'd do that, and we'd go to class, and we would. I remember it was like called Food for Singles, and we were like, we're baking cookies today, and the teacher was checked out. Like, it was just kind of a no-brainer class.
So you're baking like pot cookies in school?
No. We had already eaten them.
Okay. You'd already eaten them. Okay. Still pretty incredible. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember going to practice and like, just not caring, like having this kind of like, what are you going to do about it? Like, like kind of a really shitty attitude of like, what are you going to do about it? To the coaches. And at that point I had started, I'd been looked at, colleges had started to look at me. I was still fine. I mean, I was still, often you look back and it's like, man, what could I have been if I had, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I was still decent enough to get, looked at University of Richmond. I got a scholarship to swim there. But I was still surviving. I mean, I was still getting fine grades. I was still swimming fine. But my mom and my sister was really good. She was third in the world at 14. So my mom was, I'd kind of drifted off into the shadows. Like, she was super focused on her and her swimming. My brother was starting to come up as an incredible swimmer. So I kind of just faded away and really started my addiction spiral. I'd come home, like I would drink. I didn't drink during the week, but on the weekends I did. And there was actually a girl who later helped me get sober. We would drink with, and we would do the hey mister, because we grew up in Towson, so we'd stand outside the liquor stores and ask the guys for Boone's Farms. We were like, I don't know, kind of cute 16-year-old young girls, and we're like, we have $20. Can you buy us some Boone's Farms?
What is it with us in the Boone's Farms? I mean, what the hell was going on with that? We used to go to golf courses and just get wrecked on Boone's Farm. Like, it was Mad Dog 2020, something like that.
Yeah, and then because before that, when it was just beer, like the lacrosse guys were like, we're not buying Boone's Farms, we're not buying wine, we're not buying that stuff, and so they'd come out with roses wild rose Irish wine or something. I don't know if that even, it is disgusting. And it was like, and I was like fancy and like, I'm in high school drinking red wine. And it was the grossest. It was so disgusting. But Boone's Farm at least tasted really good, you know, and we could split a bottle of Boone's Farms and it was great. But then I would get, and you know, the things we do, I would buy Bubblicious cotton candy gum because I was convinced it masked the flavor. I mean, the smell of the booze. Did you
have any consequences like with that? Did you get caught drinking? I know your mom, you said, was focused on your siblings, but did you live with your mom or your dad after they got divorced?
We live with my mom.
Okay. And where's dad?
My mom. So there's three.
Where's dad?
Three of us. So he's around. He's at swim meets. He's kind of, you know, he's around. He was working. I mean, my dad worked a lot to make sure we could swim and had the money because my dad's a police officer. My mom was a teacher. So swimming fees were expensive. And so my dad worked really hard and like would bartend it or bounce at a bar at night. You know, he'd work a day shift and then bounce at night so we could swim. And my mom stayed with us. I mean, she worked, she taught, but so we lived with her.
And your dad was a really good athlete, right?
My dad was a good athlete. Yeah. So he tried out for, I always get
the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, how did you know? Did you research?
Come on. Yeah.
Wow. Yes, he did. I said the Eagles at one point and he's like, no, yes. So he tried out. He was a really good football player. My mom was a cheerleader. You know, it was this romantic idea, you know.
It sounds like
romantic story.
It sounds like that you guys are like the ultimate family. But now here Hilary is, who is number one in the world or a country at her age. And you mentioned it. I mean, we can kind of lean into it because right now I think the way things turned out, you're sitting around and you're helping somebody today and you have this sunlight of the spirit that goes through you and continuously helps people. It's not like you're in prison or you died or you're still drinking, but your alcoholism and drug use clearly affected your swimming career.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. And because if I'm being brutally honest, I looked at it like, okay, I'm a straight A student. I'm a great swimmer. I'm still not good enough. So let me go the other direction and see if I get it. If I'm looking back now. So that's kind of what I realized. Like, well, I'm not getting the attention when I'm doing great things. Maybe I'll get the attention when I'm not. And that didn't matter either. But doing not good things was a lot more fun than doing the great swimming and studying really hard. And
I have a good buddy who shared this exact same philosophy. He's sober now, but he kind of wanted to carve out like his niche in being, or niche, however you say that, in being the best at being the worst, or, you know, because early on in his childhood, he was like, I don't know if I can be the best at anything, but I can be the best at this. And it's sort of, and he's just an extremely successful guy and a total competitor.
Because again, a generalization, I think most alcoholics are really badass people, like in a good way. Like, I think we have a lot of drive. I think we're super talented. I think we're, you know, like, I mean, I love the quote by Einstein. It's like, we're all geniuses, but if you judge a fish by his ability to climb the tree, he's not, you know, something like that. Like, I think we're all geniuses in our own way. But I think alcoholics are just exceptional people, but exactly. And so when you put our mind to doing something, whether it's being the best at something, being really bad, like, we're going to do it, you know, because we have that drive.
Now, I don't want to say you're exactly like me, but we went to the same college. I think you were a year younger than me, or 2 years. I think 2 years.
I think we're the same year. It's 2000. Are you 2000?
No, I'm 99.
Oh, then yeah, I'm a year younger.
Okay. So we both, we show up as athletes to college, and I was just a drunk from the moment I got there. I was drunk before I got there. And then I got there, and for people that don't know, the University of Richmond, God bless the school. It was awesome. I got a great education and some of the best friends I'll ever have in my life. I was lucky to go there. But the way that it was set up, like it was boys on one side and girls on the other. It's not like that anymore. I had like zero interact. I don't know that I mean, outside of class, like I had no people skills, and I certainly didn't know how to relate to females, and I was always drunk when I was around them because it was always like a social setting, which I think it didn't do me any favors developmentally, but that kind of ramped up, made my drinking even more so because whenever I would be out socially, I'd be around females and I would just get wasted. And I think there's a sports part of that too, maybe, just kind of go hard or go home. Did you have that at all?
Absolutely, yeah. And the swimmers were all drunk. I mean, they're not all alcoholics.
I know,
but we all
yeah.
you know what I mean? But and maybe that was like that, across most of this, but we all hung together and we drank hard, and we would show up to practice drunk or super hungover, or we did everything to the extreme. I mean, we used to drive to the training in Florida. We would do like winter training, so we'd all take a bus and we'd all like pack booze and like get hammered on the bus, and so then you have 30 drunk kids on a bus, like one bathroom, people get. I mean, it's just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yes, swimming, sports. I mean, I think because there's that competitive drive. Yeah, we do everything big.
What was happening to your development, like as a person? Like I always felt like when I got to college, especially because I could drink as much as I could figure it out, I totally pressed the pause button emotionally on any kind of growth or development. Did you have a similar experience?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, trying to think of, I was just a mess. I mean, I just didn't give a shit. I just didn't give a shit about anything but drinking. I didn't care about, so that's not true. When I was sober, when I wasn't drinking, I would have these, I would care, I'd be kind, and then drinking started and all bets were off.
Yeah.
I was all about myself. I was all about, not caring if I hurt somebody else, not caring if I got behind the wheel of a car. Like it was like night and day. I mean, it's a light switch. And that was a really hard part because then I'd sober up or the next morning and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like shame, like that shame. And so as a person, and then it's like, you either go one way or the other. You either get help or you keep going down that spiral. And I kept going down that spiral. And eventually it's just kind of like, I totally lost myself. I lost who I was. I lost my, it's like, for me, like just the ego took over because all that mattered was getting attention or getting affection or getting drunk or getting whatever, like fill in the blank. It was all about like more, whatever. And if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And because guys, I don't care, if you're the toughest tough guy on the block, you have shame. You may not want to admit it and you may cover it up with bravado or ego, but guys wake up and they have shame, after like whatever, young guys. And it's different. I don't care how you slice it. And especially was when we were in college, like there was a different emphasis put on women and how they behaved. So it's like, there's just more pressure, I would imagine.
Totally. And that's that's not a, but it is like, and that's kind of the joke. It's like guys, it's like, hey, good for you. And girls, it's like, you're an awful human. Like,
I don't know. I laugh because I really I don't know. Like that's just so unfortunate, that it's like that or was like that.
Yeah. And I mean, there are a lot of, I say there are a lot of regrets. There aren't a lot of regrets because everything I did brought me to this point and I couldn't be happier with who I am today, period. But there's still like, it's when you leave that destruction of other people in your path that it starts to feel really bad. Because I think, again, like at my core, I'm not a deceitful person. I'm not, manipulative. I'm not a liar, but all of those things were out the window when I started drinking. Like those things didn't matter. Everything, everyone that I was, every great trait that I had was totally flushed down the toilet the second I poured alcohol into my body.
Well, and for me and I know for you, like I relate to that as well, but that's why we have a program because like there's no real way, I don't know, I only know one way to do it, right? But like to stop, because now you're on planet Earth and you've got all these
Mhm.
emotions and quote unquote regrets that you've got to deal with. But you're getting involved in recovery, and for me, getting involved in 12 step make me realize like, oh, I'm not a bad person. I was sick. And
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
people that I had hurt, they now see me getting well.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay. And they understand. They may not even say it and they may never want to talk to me again, but I'm doing my part from here on out. And that shame goes away, because what do, right? We start to stack esteemable acts on top of one another. And we're like, okay, like I'm not a piece of garbage. I'm actually all right. And I have these real actions that I do every day that speak to that.
Right. And it's like also, that living amends, like you just said, someone may never speak to you again, but I'll never treat another human like that. Or I'm not that person anymore. Therefore, I know that I won't repeat those patterns because I've made the conscious effort to change, and when you're at that place of, and for a long time, it was like, I can pick shame or I can pick recovery. Or I can pick recovery, or I can continue to hide or, repress the shame.
Uh-huh.
And for a very long time, I just continued to repress the shame, which meant drinking on top of it. It's like, well, I'm really embarrassed, or I made a bad decision, or this isn't who I am. I can ask for help, or I can keep going. And for a long time, it was like, I'm just going to keep going because I don't want to deal with this. And it's really funny. It's like this past Easter, I was with my mom, and we were joking because my mom's like, I learned that from my mother. And so it was a passed down trait. Like, we joke about it, but my mom's like, when I was little, put your sunglasses on, stop crying. It'll go away eventually.
100%.
And her mom taught her that. And so that's what I did. And I was like, well, if I just look the other way, if I grin and bear it, if I smile and I look great on the outside or good on the outside, or at least not, crying, then I'm okay. And everyone else will think I'm okay. And that's what matters, what everybody else thinks. And so if everybody else can look at me and say, like, she's got her stuff together, then I'm fine, even though on the inside I'm like burning alive.
And
that was a really hard thing to kind of get through.
Well,
to talk about it, right, and to admit.
And this is a question I want to ask you now. So you're going through college, and I had some people kind of check in with me, like, dude, like, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
Like something's up with you. I'm noticing that I'm drinking differently than other people. Did you have? I have alcoholism all in my family. Do you have that at all, like in your family?
Remember what I said, like, we don't talk about things in my family.
Yeah.
So we don't know. I mean, I'm kidding, but like, it depends on who you ask. Like, some people will say yes, and I think my grandparents. I think some people will say there's problem drinking, but I was the first person in my family, I believe, on either side to admit that I had a problem called alcoholism, ever.
Yeah. My brother, I think my brother Kevin was. I mean, these guys are out there and they're sober now. And then Mike definitely was. Like, my dad's side of the family is like alcoholics, just littered with alcoholics. Good people, but sick people. And they didn't, if you showed up to work, you were okay. And and that's just like, I don't know, man. It was nice that I had some people come before me to snap that branch of the family tree. And it sounds like you did that for your family. So you're here, that voice in the back of your head, is it telling you like, maybe I need to do something about this? Was that ever happen in college, or were you just like, keep marching on?
No. And because I surrounded myself with people that drank like me. And so I had a couple, like my best friend, college roommate, who I'm still incredibly close to, is my best friend in the world. She's amazing. And she was like, I'm concerned. Like, because I was a blackout drinker.
Yeah.
Even in college. I mean, especially in college. And I would run in heels. Like, I don't know, how girls dress up to go out on Friday night, like wear heels and like would run, and I'd fall and I'd wake up with bruises and cuts all over my legs. And I was like, ha ha, it's so funny. It's so, look what I did last night. And it's not funny. And the sad part was that continued into my 20s.
Yeah.
Eventually it's not funny when you're 28 and, the scars all over your legs and bruises all over your legs from falling. But I also, like, the swimmers drank a ton. And so I really surrounded myself with other people that drank like me. And there was a joke. It's like, only alcoholics go to meetings. Therefore, I'm not an alcoholic. And it was, and I laughed about it in college. And then later I'm like, and so, yeah, a couple people, especially my senior year, were like, you're not being a nice person. Like, we're really concerned about you. And I was like, what are you going to do about it? Not fine. I don't need to be like I had that kind of smug, like, I don't need to hear what you have to say. This is your problem, not mine attitude. Which didn't do me any favors, So I had some really good friends who I'm friends with now, like but at the time it was like, there were a couple of weeks there. It was really tough. Or like, this isn't okay. This isn't who you are. Like, you've gotten worse. But it was also like, I'm in college. Everybody does this in college.
How did you finish up? Go ahead.
But what I didn't realize was that nobody was getting as drunk as I was. People were drinking, but they weren't blacking out.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second. But right now, a word from our sponsors. RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
How did you finish up competitively?
I finished.
In the, but like in the pool, like, were you like, did you?
Yeah, I walked across the finish line. I was done. I came in really great. Like, did great my freshman year. By the time senior year, I was like, I'm out. And I was fine. I was okay. I made it. I swam. I think as a punishment, I was the only senior on my team that wasn't given a captain role by the coach. And I was really upset because there were only 4 of us and there were 3 captains. And I was like, so I don't know if that was kind of a,
And that's the kind of shit we bury underneath more alcohol. That's the kind of stuff like I know, right. Like stuff like that, like whatever, and they don't because of this or that, or I
don't really care.
Yeah, I don't care, and that's like all that stuff mounts. Did you real back before we get you out of college? Did you have any what was that? Your parents' divorce, was that preying on you at all as you went through college, or was that something that didn't affect you?
No, and I have to say my parents did a really great job of holding it. I mean, they would drive to swim meets together. So I've got to give them kudos and props. Like, they would get in the car. My brother would come. He was still in high school. My sister was at school in Vegas.
She was at school in Vegas because she was such a good swimmer?
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, she went to UNLV. She ended up having an injury. But, yes, so she went to UNLV, and her 21st birthday was wild. So I was 23 and she was 21, and we went out to Vegas for her birthday, and it was like, yeah. But my brother, this is so for that's a conversation, not podcast. But
okay.
She, so my brother, my mom, and my dad would get in the car and they'd drive from Baltimore and come to all my swim meets. And so that was really nice for me to see the kindness that they had towards one another. I mean, they weren't friends, they didn't hang out, but they definitely put on a really good show or face or whatever it was when it came to supporting me in swimming and school and all that. So that was, I think the divorce allowed me space to explore my alcoholism to a greater extent to some, because they weren't under the same roof, and you could kind of, nobody's, 3 kids. So I think it gave me a little bit of space to explore that, but the 2 of them together were really great as far as coming, graduation and school and swim meets and all of that stuff. They really did a great job of kind of putting on that front of at least getting along.
I mean, shit happens. People get divorced. I mean, that's life. And it sounds like they handled it in a pretty positive way. Now, you get out of college. What happens to your life?
It's like it's like off to the races.
What are you doing? Are you work in PR, right?
So I worked, I stayed in Richmond. I worked at a small marketing firm, so I had a lot of great experience. And we did a press event at the National Press Club in DC. I met a employer there, and so I ended up, because I was like, I don't want to stay in Richmond. I want to go to a big city, right? And so I ended up moving back home to Baltimore and commuting to DC. But then I ended up moving closer to DC. So I was commuting. I actually lived in Laurel, which is outside of DC, right between Baltimore and Washington. Sorry, take a drink.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I would take the train in. So it's like the MARC train, it's a commuter train.
Uh-huh.
And I would drink coffee in the morning, and then I'd go to work. And at Union Station in DC, I don't think it's there anymore, there used to be a liquor store, and I would get 2 bottles of the little single serving wine things, and I would go in the bathroom and wash my cup out, because people would drink on the train ride home all the time, but they would give you little dental cups, like the clear tiny mouthwash cup things. I was like, no, it's not going to work. So I'd go to the bathroom, I'd wash the coffee out from that day, pour the 2 bottles of wine in, and drink that on the way home, because if I'm chugging it, nobody's going to think it's wine. And so I would take the train home, I'd go back to my apartment, and I'd drink a bottle or 2 of wine a night. And that became my life.
We skipped over a good part. So you said there was a relationship, and was that in Richmond or into DC?
Yeah, so that was in DC. So when I was I'd found myself in dysfunctional relationships after college.
It's a surprise, right?
I sought out, right? I sought out people who were just as dysfunctional as I was. Whether it was, one was smoking marijuana all the time. As much as I was drinking, he was smoking weed. We didn't talk. It was just existing. You know what I mean? But I was like, cool. This person's not going to judge me for getting hammered every night and blacking out and go, he's just smoking weed. So he'd sit on one end of the couch, I'd sit on the other. It just, but it was fine until it wasn't, until he was like, I think you have a problem. I'm like, you have a problem.
Yeah.
And and just all the craziness, just the falling. And I was continuing to black out, and I was getting older, and I was, I think I was 25 at that point. And I just started traveling when Michael was swimming. I would get drunk in different countries.
What's that like, by the way? Your brother starts to ascend. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, right? His rise he's everywhere. He's gold medal upon gold medal. What's that like for you to be a part of that ride? Because you guys are really tight.
And it was different, pre-drinking versus post-drink. Because pre-drink, it was great. It was a great party. It was a great vacation. We'd go and watch him swim. My mom would go home. I'd go out with the younger people. We'd get hammered, and it was amazing. And as an alcoholic, there was a lot of attention, and I loved that.
Yeah.
It's oh, I'm important. I'm not doing anything, but I'm really important. And that was, so there were a couple of Olympics, sounds so funny, a couple of Olympics, 2000, 2004.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
That I was drinking, and, we had, and some of it was really fun, but I remember being at a party, a media party. They had these massive ones.
This is in Athens?
This was in Athens. Yeah. And it's who's who of parties. I mean, all these celebrities and media personalities and athletes and just everybody's there. And, you can't take, it was still the time of a flip phone. So it's not they're can't take any pictures.
But that's the real stuff. When you're around people, you're just like, what the heck is happening?
Yeah. But we were my sister and I were dancing on the stage, and someone the next day was like, you were really drunk last night. And I remember saying, no, I wasn't. I remember everything. That was my barometer. If I remembered it, I wasn't that drunk.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I blacked out, then that was a good night, I think. Or was it? It's kind of that weird, I don't know. yeah, I just found myself in dysfunctional relationships. And then that was, that one ended when he's like, I think you have a problem. And then I found myself in another one that was even worse. I mean, he came from an alcoholic family. There's a lot of abuse. There was a lot of anger there, and he was, I didn't know that. He was living with another girl that he had just gotten engaged to, and he broke it off. Like, it was,
Wow.
that just like level of just like insanity that looking back, it was like, in the moment I was like, oh, this must be true love. And looking back, I'm like, this is so dramatic and unnecessary and insane. And that's the relationship I got sober in. So as crazy as it was and as dysfunctional, and
I got to ask, you said abuse. Was he abusing you?
There's verbal and
Okay.
And there's a lot of anger, slamming doors, breaking doors off hinges, kind of things like that. Like no physical abuse, but just the intimidation. Yeah, intimidation.
That's abuse.
From
the verbal.
family.
I mean, that's not
Yeah,
like
it is.
That's.
I know.
Yeah, that stuff has a lasting impact.
It does, and that's the girl thing too. Because some people are like, it's not abuse unless it leaves a mark, and I'm like, well, that's not really accurate.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So how do we get sober? So we're in this.
So how do we get sober?
Nightmare.
So we're in this relationship.
Right. I've been in plenty of them, so there's no judgment here. Yeah. It's the worst. It is exhaustion. The alcoholism is exhaustion, and then the relationship, and the like you said, the drama, and when normal people get a window, this is for me, into this relationship, they're like, oh my God. Like, you bring your relationship around people that are like actually on planet Earth, and they're like, Jesus, like what? Like, and even as screwed up as I was at the time, I remember thinking like, oh boy, like the walls are closing in. Like, my buddies who I used to party with till we both fell down or never slept, now they don't even want to talk to me because of my situation, my relationships, and yeah, and sounds like you were at the same point. So what happens when you say enough is enough?
Exact same point. So what happened was my friends were all like, what are you doing? Just leave, right? Like, we'd been 3 months in, so we decided to go to couples counseling. We've been together for 3 months. I mean, this is like ridiculous, right? My friends are like, why are you even wasting the time? I'm like, because it's meant to be. I know it, like I want this like fairy tale moment, and he's the one that's going to deliver this, like, I mean, and that's like, for
just
me
happily
anyway,
ever
like
after.
Yeah, it's going to be happily ever after. And for me, as like an alcoholic, I can convince myself of anything or talk myself in or out of anything, right? Like using my mind. And so I was living in this really focused, like, mind space of convincing myself that this is what it was. My friends were like, you're insane. He didn't like any of my friends. They didn't like him. So either And so he said to go to this therapist, and he's like, she has a drinking problem. And the woman's like, do you think you have a drinking problem? And I was like, I mean, I don't know. I just drink 2 glasses of wine a day. And she goes, how big are the glasses? And I was like, damn it, you got my number. Like, she knew, because it was like, they were big glasses filled to the top. And so she's like, why don't you start coming to me independent? And so I did. And so I went to, it's my first therapy, because my family didn't believe in therapy. I'd asked to go when I was younger, and I was told it was fine. I was fine. And so when I got into therapy, and I had this woman listening, and she's like, do you think you have a problem? I'm like, I don't know. She goes, well, what happens if you don't drink tonight? And I was like, I'd be fine. And so I was like, well, what if I have 1 glass? And so, I have 1 glass of wine. I lay in bed, and it's worse. It's purgatory. It's worse than not drinking, having 1 glass of wine. And so I get up in the middle of the night. I find NyQuil, I drink that, and I go to bed, because I'm like, I can't, like, the skin is crawling. I have major anxiety. I can't drink 1 glass. And so that didn't work. And she's like, why don't we go to a meeting? And I was like, you've got to be kidding. An AA meeting? There's no, I would rather die than go to an AA meeting. No, or, a 12-step recovery meeting. Like, there's no way. No. I'm like, and so eventually after, I said, yeah, I was like, okay, I'll go. And so she's like, I'll go with you. I was like, gosh darn it.
This is a kick-ass therapist.
She's amazing. I still remember her name. I think I still have her card. Like, I've been thinking about whether like to connect with her again. But she's like,
yeah,
oh, why don't I
you
go
just
with
said
you?
it. Connect with her. You gotta send her a message.
Yeah.
So what
And
happens?
just
So
say,
she
like,
goes with you?
So we go. She's like, okay, let's meet here. We'll go. I was so proud of myself. I didn't drink the night before. It's like a huge deal. I go into the meeting and these people are sharing so openly, and it's so uncomfortable because they're talking about things that I always thought you never talk about. You don't talk about your relationship openly. You don't talk about abuse openly. You don't talk about your drinking openly. Like, you keep those things quiet. You just put a smile on and you just look the part. And so these people are very transparent, and that was very uncomfortable. And so a woman came up to me after the meeting and she's like, you're new. Here's a big book. Tell me your story. Tell me everything.
Where was the meeting, by the way? In
here?
DC?
It was in a little train depot outside of Laurel, Maryland.
Okay.
I've also thought about going back there. It was on a Sunday. And I was like so overwhelmed. I'm like, I can't go back. I don't want to tell you anything. I don't want like this. I wasn't ready. And so I was like, I won't drink, but I'm not going back there. And so I held out for 3 months, and then it was Christmas. And I'm like, it's Christmas. It's New Year's Eve. Of course you have to drink. Everybody drinks. So I drank. And everything that's written in the big book is, it's just waiting. At least here we say, your disease is doing push-ups, just waiting for you to come back.
Yeah. My
disease was stronger than ever. And I was off to the races. It was not one night. It was so much worse. The hangover. It was excruciating. I was in bed for the weekend. I'm like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Then it was my birthday 3 months later. I'm like, okay, one more time. Let's see. It's just as bad. I'd find myself waking up in the morning, sitting in the shower, kidneys in pain, my body hurt, my skin hurting, thinking, I can't do this anymore. But by noon, I'm like, I feel fine. It was just a one-time thing. Yeah. And I'd go back out. And so then ultimately what happened is this relationship, even though everybody knew I was drinking, everybody saw it, everybody, my family would see me drink. He said, if you don't get your stuff together, I'm going to tell your family how bad it really is. And that, to me, I couldn't even fathom. And so I said, okay. And the relationship had ended. I'd moved to DC, and I had.
But are you still on again, off again with this dude?
It was like that weird space of like, we would talk every once in a while, but then, yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So he genuinely cared about you. And he was like, this is bad.
Yes. And I credit him. As bad as as unhealthy as the relationship was, I credit him for getting me sober, 100%.
Wow.
And so by the grace of God,
Hilary, isn't that funny? I always say, like, whatever gets you in the door. Like, whatever. And sometimes it's the craziest people. It's the most unexplainable of situations. But the fact that you make it in there alive with a heartbeat and you've got a shot, like, awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even in meetings, even when I share my story and everything, every single thing, I credit him. I wouldn't talk to him. I haven't talked to him. We have no contact. There's no need, I have no desire there, but because of him, I got sober. Yeah. And so he was, I think we were on the phone, and, because I would drunk text.
Uh-huh.
So I'd get really drunk and then look at my phone the next day. I'm like, ugh. And that was when they're flip phones. So you'd have to work for text messages.
Yeah. It's like 2007, right? Like the razors, whatever. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it wasn't like the, keyboard. I mean, anyway, so darn it. So he's like, you need
I can only
help.
imagine what some of those text messages actually look like.
I know.
Yeah.
The incoherent, insanity. And so, yeah. And I lived on my own. And he was like, you need help. And so I called a couple of, I'm not going to inpatient because that's for people that really have problems.
Yeah.
I'll go to outpatient. I tried 12 step. It didn't work. I'm going to I'll check out this space. And so I did. And I called this place and they said, it was a Thursday. And they said, we don't have space until Monday. Can you try to stay sober this weekend? Sure. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, not a chance.
Yeah.
Not a chance. And that Friday night I went out by myself to a bar that I knew with bartenders. And it was messy. Yeah, it got messy. And then I was sitting next to a guy that was a coke dealer. and he was flirting with me. And I was like, maybe I don't have to go to rehab. I can just marry this guy. He's going to save me.
Yeah.
This is my answer. This is why. And then clearly I did not. And I checked into rehab on Monday.
So you went to the IOP?
That was last. So intensive, yes, IOP, yes.
Okay.
And then continuing care after that. So it's called Colmac. It's in DC.
I've heard of it. So I went to, after I went to Karen, and then I lived in Bel Air. I went to like a halfway house. And so there were people in the Bel Air area that had gone to Colmac.
I grew up in Whiteford.
Oh, that's right around the corner.
Yes, that's the country I grew up in. So it's like 20 minutes north of Baltimore on the Pennsylvania line. That's where I grew up. So Baltimore. And then my parents, Whiteford, and then my parents would drive me to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Often, to swim.
Yeah. And I worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Bel Air.
I heard. I heard your story with Mark. I listened to that podcast, and I was like, that's when I met you. I'm like, you're the most amazing human. What a humbling and beautiful, incredible path.
Well, thank you for saying that. A lot of good chicken, so I can't complain. So
you still eat it?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah. Yeah?
Did you ever have grilled?
I've had grilled. I've had it all, and I would like to go back there to that one in Bel Air. I would, but at some point I'll have to do it. All right. So back to you. So you're going to this IOP, and what's happening to your life?
So going to IOP, it's 5 days a week, 3 hours a night, right after work, 5:30 to 8:30. You're taking end of use, you're checking in, and I'm still pretending like I am fine. I'm smiling. I'm going into IOP. I'm like, you check in. So you go around the room. How was your day? What's new? What's happening in your life? I'm good. I'm great. Work is fine. Everything's good. Smile, take my end of use, sit back down. I'm like, fine. I feel fine. I feel, things are easier. I'm sleeping. Then it's not fine. Then I go into IOP one night, and I'm spiral. Like I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm depressed. I'm upset. I'm everything. All those emotions that I've been drinking down and stuffing for so many years come to the surface, and I'm sitting in the corner, I'm just crying. And they get to me, and I was like, I'm fine. And they're like, are you? And I go, no, I'm not fine. And I let it all out. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what this is. I don't know why I'm angry. I'm not angry at anything. I don't know what's happening right now. This is really frustrating for me. I can't control it. I can't and they started clapping. And I'm like, why are you clapping? This isn't okay. And they're like, this is great. And from that moment, I was like, it's okay to just be honest. That was this breaking point. I mean, I literally had a breaking point, and it just came out, and I was in a safe space to share it. Thank God. And they, and as the firstborn, as an overachiever, as a competitive, all of that stuff, I got approval for letting it out. And I was like, oh. And then a couple days later, I was going around. I was like, great. I'm feeling so good. I'm going to be a vegan. I'm going to quit. I was smoking tons of cigarettes at the time. I'm going to be a vegan. I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes. I'm going to quit caffeine. I'm going to quit Diet Coke. I'm going to quit sugar, and I'm going to quit drinking. Now is the time when I become perfect. And they look at me. They're like, just don't drink.
Yeah.
You can do all those other things all you want. Just don't drink. And I was like, oh. And again, it was like someone let me off the hook, and I didn't have to be perfect or appear perfect or any of those things. So I was like, cool, I can still smoke. Okay. So I go out at halftime, whatever, and smoke cigarettes, and I'm drinking my Diet Coke and all of those things. But it was like somebody gave me that out to just focus on that one thing, which is not drinking a day at a time. And from there, I mean, I did everything the first year that people suggested, everything. I went, they gave me, you're not supposed to fraternize or go to meetings with people in your IOP group. And so they give you the numbers of women who have gone through the program already, so you can meet them for meetings. Because they had people go out. And
you called those women?
I did.
See, nobody does that usually. That's impressive, right?
I was desperate. There was one night, right? Because I would go to IOP during the week, and then on weekends I went to meetings, because on Monday at the IOP, they said, what meetings did you go to? And I was not going to I was not going to be the one that didn't go. I was held accountable. Like somebody held me accountable, and I would go back and I was like, I went to this meeting, but I didn't share. And then there was one night, like a Saturday night, when I had a craving, it was like, the craving was lifted pretty quickly for me. Like I didn't have the craving. I just had all of the other stuff. I had all the other isms that came with it. So that was mine. There were a couple of times when I had a craving, and this was like maybe 6 weeks in. I was so mad. And so at myself, I'm like, this shouldn't be happening. I'm 6 weeks sober.
Yeah.
I should be fine by now.
Yeah.
And
now here you are, almost 16 years. And if it goes through your head, you're like, I'm an alcoholic. At least that's how I am.
Right.
Like, if it goes through my head, I'm like, dude, that's because you're a nut job. You're an alcoholic. You respect the disease and don't make more of it than it is.
Yeah. And just choose to make the best decision instead of right. And so, but then I judged myself and all the stuff that came with it. I called 2 numbers I knew, nobody answered. I left a voicemail and I was like, well, what do I do? And I remember sitting in my apartment by myself. I had no NyQuil, nothing with alcohol in it, no mouthwash. I had no vanilla, like, cause I heard stories, people
Sure.
go, and I did not want to be tempted. So I cleaned everything. When I got my new place, I did not get anything that had any kind of alcohol or any kind of like substance that could alter my perception. And so I was sitting there, I'm like, what do I do? So I made a pot of coffee because I was like, that's something. It's not alcohol, but I knew if I left, I was going to drink or get drugs or do something or do something because I just wanted to numb. So I drank coffee. I turned on When a Man Loves a Woman, Andy Garcia and Meg Ryan, the story of alcoholism. I watched that. I cried. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and I was like, I did it. I got through it. And if I did that once, I can do it again. And that's for me, like what the power of the program is, knowing if I tackle something tough and I get through it and I make it to the other side without using drugs or alcohol, then I can do it again. And it's just built on that. And it gets stronger.
What do you tell, what are you telling people around you, your family, your close friends, people that are starting to see a change in you? Do you tell them, cause like somebody had done it before you and somebody will do it after you. Like what do you tell people, if you're sponsoring somebody, like how did you handle it? What's your experience?
So I made all new friends because all of my current friends, or my friends at that time, were all active drinkers. I was the worst, right? So they didn't want to let me go because I made them look great, like I was the blackout. I was the one. So I had somebody at that point look at me and it felt like a stab. I remember her looking at me and she goes, you stopped drinking and you're no fun anymore. And that at 2 months sober is crushing. Because I'm like, well, who am I? What am I? Because all I want to be is fun. I want someone to laugh at my jokes and and if I'm not that, what am I? So I'd turn to the room. I went to the meeting and shared it. And I had other women, be like, oh, tell story, and I don't remember what they were, but I did everything I was told. I followed the directions of other women in the program. I went to a meeting every single day. I did not share in the beginning as often, but going to IOP made sharing easier. Sometimes I'd sit in the back and I'd put my head in my hands and I would just cry because I didn't know what else to do, but I was in the meeting and I knew I was safe. And so my advice is always go to a meeting because any answer to every problem is in a meeting in some way, shape, or form.
What's it like? What's it like for and this is gonna sound stupid. What's it like for a woman to get sober? Like a lot of times you can be the minority in the room. I would guess it takes a little more strength to walk in there sometimes.
And especially in the beginning, because I was not the kind of woman I wanted to be a friend with. Like I wasn't kind. I was backstabbing. I talked shit about people. Like I was not a good person. I was not a kind person. And the reason it was so hard is because it's not who I am in my soul. That's not who I am, but drinking created that person. Like that's who I was when I drank. And so for a really long time, that's who I was. And so when I go into a meeting, I don't want to talk to the other women because I assume they're just like me. And there are some women in meetings that are still, but, it's hard. I think, I don't know. I think because there is so much shame, and that sounded really judgy, and I didn't mean, I was trying to be funny, not judgy. When
You were
said
funny.
that.
I laughed.
I was like, oh my gosh, wait a second. That's kind of bitchy. And I was like,
by the way, I'll do you a favor if you want. I'll take that out if you want me to. All right.
No, I was like, ooh, but no, but it's also like rooms rooms of people in the program are just humans, so nobody's perfect, including myself.
I said
so
to a dude
that,
today, a guy was having issues with people in recovery for whatever reason, and I said, dude, don't forget anybody can walk in there. Like, it's not the mental board of health, and people have to remember that. I mean, this podcast is probably a glowing endorsement. It is for recovery on 12-step, but look, man, people are going to be people.
Well, we're humans, right? Like, and I think I love this. It's like, it takes 5 years to find your marbles, 10 years to gather them, and then 15 years to know what to do with them. And I found that to be true. When I had 6 months, I was like, I got this. And then I didn't, I was like, I don't have this. I'm still not. And even today with almost 15 years of recovery, like, I'm not perfect. I just have better tools. I just know myself better. It's not, and so I'm still fallible. I still get in a bad mood. My son's like, you need coffee first. I'm like, yes, I do. I still get, I'm still human, and we all are still human, but we just make better choices. I make better choices than I did,
Which was it for sure. Was there a moment when somebody in your life that you were close to looked at you when you were sober and was like, gosh, I can't believe how much you've changed? Like, so like something like that, where it's kind of like, wow, this is working. Because sometimes we're the last people to know how sick we are, and we're the last people to know how well we're getting.
Yes. So more when I was drinking, I remember somebody saying to me, I get these glimpses of who I think you really are. And then you start drinking and everything disappears. I think the more time I have, the more that person is there all the time, like there's that change. I'm trying to think, because there was a long time my mom didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to deal with it, that I was sober, because she didn't know how to process it.
But what a gift to your family. I mean, like, because
right.
Your brothers had publicly struggled, and he's come out and owned stuff. And I got to believe it's just like my family, except for we're in a bubble. Like, I probably do not get sober if my brother Michael doesn't walk in a meeting and say he's sober. And like I said earlier, snap off that branch of the family tree and at least open the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And then my brother Kevin followed suit, and it was like, okay, Yeah.
Are you the youngest?
I am the youngest, yeah. And Kevin's the oldest, so Michael went first. I mean, I always tell people this is the last fucking club we wanted to join, but here we are, and it's the best thing that ever happened to us. But Mike first, and then Kevin after, and then they had written me off for As Good as Dead, but then I and that's what I always tell people too. I was as hopeless as somebody could be, and here I am talking to you today. So, but anyway, so you opened that channel of communication for your family, but a year in, your mom still doesn't want to talk about it because she's a human being too.
I don't know that my mom didn't talk about it until my brother went. So it was a very, and then that goes to my. Right? Like that goes to my insecurities of like, now I'm still not good enough either.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was drinking, I wasn't good enough. Now I'm sober. I'm not good enough. Like, what is it? And what I've had to learn is to let the people in the program love me, and like, you are good enough. And,
the family stuff's always a nightmare, Hilary, right? I mean, right.
Well, that's what I was like, my family's the only one that's dysfunctional. And then you get into the rooms and you're like, oh, my family is not dysfunctional at all, whatever. But it's like, and that's the beauty of it too. It's like the rooms are just a place like for extended family. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's literally where I've taken every single problem and someone has raised their hand or somebody, because the good thing about going and walking into a meeting is that some people may have, some people could have really bad days, but then there are a lot of people who are there who are having really good days. And so that's like the great reminder to go all the time, because you never know when your good days are going to help somebody who's having a bad day.
There was a woman, Marilyn, who went to this, she's since passed, but she went to this meeting outside of Philly that I go to all the time, 562, it was a clubhouse. And she would say, if you're having a bad day, go to a meeting. If you're having a good day, go to two. And it really is. We need those people in meetings who are having good days, who are experiencing success, who are, I've heard a guy say he's sober 20 some years, and he's playing golf with a guy who's sober 20 some years. But the one guy is like, yeah, I just don't go to meetings anymore. I just don't need it. And the guy who's actively going to meetings says, oh, so you got yours. So now fuck everybody else. And it's kind of
good.
And it's, it's a little harsh and pardon the language, but like that is, look, our job is to pay it forward. And by the way, if I don't go to meetings, I'm going to lose my shit. So I need to go. I will never be able to be that guy. But some people, I guess, I don't know, are doing okay. But, to keep going and to let the person with a day see you or whoever, they'll see Hilary at 16 years and then they're like, oh, okay. Because we all crawled in there. I mean, all of us crawled in there in one way or another.
Nobody wants to be there. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Like nobody wants to give it up and I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about our conversation. It's like alcohol was the only person, it was the one thing that never let me down until it stopped working. Right? It was there on good days. It was there on bad days. It was there when I was happy. It was there when I was sad. It was there when I was bored. I mean, I used to get drunk to do the laundry. I would get drunk to go to the grocery store. I would put wine in a sippy cup. Like I was like the generic alcoholic mom before I was even a mom. Like it was, I do it all this. I did it all the time. And it was always there for me. It always made me feel better. It always, gave me that feeling of like, I can do anything. And then it stopped working. And I was like, damn you, why, how could you do this to me? And then losing that best friend and having to replace it with tools that are healthier and better is really hard because I didn't want to lose that best friend. I didn't want to, because that was easy. I wanted like before I even explored the option of getting sober, I was like, and I don't say this to be funny, but this is literally, I was like, maybe I'm dyslexic. Maybe I'm a lesbian. Maybe I am fill in the blank. Like I was trying to find every route possible for my discomfort and discontent other than having to give up my alcohol. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I mean, it's like anything, nothing, there was nothing I will put in front of that. There's just what never was. And when you look back, those are the moments of insanity. I talk about it when they were like, oh, you could have gotten a heart problem through using drugs or abusing alcohol. And I was like, no. It was a virus. And like, I was like, and I continued to drink. And it was like one of those things where I might be killing myself, but as long as other people don't know, that's okay. And as long as I can continue to kill myself. I mean, it's purely insane, but it's where this thing takes us.
Right. That's when I heard your story. I was like, oh my gosh, you had a heart condition and you were doing coke, and oh my gosh, I was like, you did it. Like us addicts, we do it big, like go big or go home. So I'm not gonna, I say just drink with a heart condition. I'm going to drink and do coke and do ecstasy and all the other things that go with it, because I'm going to go big. Yeah. That's where we go. And that's insane. And other people don't understand. They don't understand it. They're like, you have a heart condition, you just stop, or you stop doing this, you stop doing that, or why, but I've heard stories, and I don't know if you're the same, like I remember hearing a story in a meeting one time about a homeless man, how he dropped his bottle of vodka and he had no money, and it was all he had for like the night. And he he went and he got a straw and he sucked it up off of the ground.
Oh.
And I was like, it's pretty creative.
It's clever.
Nobody that doesn't have a drinking problem is going to think that that's a good idea, And I was like, I belong here. I see you, man. I belong here too, because that didn't seem insane. What
do you do today, like as far as your program is concerned? Because you obviously, just from talking to you, you seem like you're living. You're just living free. You're not exhausted. You're full of energy. How do you keep that momentum going?
Oh, thank you. How do I keep it going? I surround myself and only listen to things that are uplifting. Also, like I don't, and these like this is now, coming up on 15 years. Like this is what I've learned. Like I don't trouble myself with gossip or like celebrity gossip. I mean, everyone's like I don't engage with drama. Like if somebody invites me to a conversation that is not healthy, like I will say I can't, because to me that's bad news for me, because that gets me those feelings of superiority. And at no point in my life do I ever want to feel superior to anybody else, because that leads me to then, okay, well, maybe I am, maybe I don't, okay, maybe I can have a drink. But that's after 15. Like I wasn't there 2 years ago, like these are things that I do. Now I pray and I meditate every single day. Prayer is asking, I think for me, it's asking God for help. It's talking to him. It's saying, I need guidance. Meditation for me is listening. So I listen and I hear guidance. My mind is silent and I can hear whether it's God's voice or my inner voice. It helps me day to day.
Do you have something you like a mantra or something you say over and over again?
That's a good question. I listen to guided meditation.
Okay.
Because for the longest time, I do have a mantra. I actually lived in an ashram. And so like for a couple of years, or a couple months, no, not a couple of years, for a couple of weeks at one point, after I got sober, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. It was after 2 years. I was like, is this it? I don't know. Because I was just having a moment. And so I was fortunate and blessed to be able to have the time to go and spend an ashram. So I do have a mantra that I say if
wait, what did
get wound up.
You spent, what was this? Like, where'd you go? I'm not a yogi like you. So where did you go to broaden this horizon?
Of Rebecca.
Yeah.
I'm not a yogi. When I think of Rebecca, I'm like, no, she's a yogi. It's an ashram. So it's where a guru lives. So it's outside of Florida. It's outside of Miami, Florida. And I studied yoga, and it was the most beautiful experience. It was quiet. It's like no cell phones, no TV. We'd wake up every morning, chant and meditate for an hour, do 2 hours of yoga, eat in silence. Karma yoga, which meant we were weeding, or we were picking avocados from the trees. I mean, it's a very privileged existence, and I don't dispute that. And I'm very blessed to have had that opportunity to go. But it was a really nice shift in my like spiritual journey. Like I consider myself incredibly spiritual. I think that the drinking and the drugs and that lifestyle muted the light. I think we all have this beautiful light inside of us that wants to shine and give the world. Like we have gifts to give the world. And I think by pouring alcohol on them, I dimmed it for so long. And for me, going to meetings, talking to people in the program, listening to positive content, doing meditation, moving my body, eating healthy, not drinking and doing drugs, like all of those things help my light shine more. They help it.
There's two things I totally relate. There's two things, like, I need to be spiritual to maintain my sobriety. This is what I've learned, which, by the way, I lack a lot. My spiritual condition is lacking. But when I am connected with God, I am also filling that void that drugs and alcohol used to fill, and it's giving me that feeling of alcohol. So it's two things. One, it's separating me from a drink, but two, it gives me that shit that I like, feeling good. That's. I heard a guy say, the guy says it. His name's Ernie. He goes to a meeting I go to around here in Texas, and he says, if you don't find something that makes you feel the same way that alcohol and drugs did, it's likely you're going to go back out and do that shit again. And I found that in recovery and talking to people like you and practicing these positive things you're talking about. Yeah.
Because there's not another human being or thing, or there's no food, there's no bag, there's no person, there's no car, there is absolutely nothing that is going to fill my hole more than the spiritual program. Nothing. And I've tried. I've tried in sobriety, and it doesn't work. And
it's usually the last thing you turn to. Like we'll always like put it down and be like, maybe I can figure out this way, X, Y, and Z. And it's like I always end up going back, because I always end up falling flat on my face with whatever I'm trying to do. All right, last thing, because I know you have a life to get onto. What do you tell a woman who comes in and just is trying to get a day? She doesn't know what to do. What do you tell her? And she asks you, she says, Hilary, what do I do?
So, and this is like, so not a process, but I realized this, like I see her and like, you have to be super careful. I'm like, do you want a hug? Because some people are like, no. And some people are like, that's all I want. And so I usually give them a hug and I just let them cry because that's what I did. And that's what would have comforted me. And so then and they say, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing now? Like, I don't have any plans. I'm like, let's go to coffee. And I will usually, unless I have something like that I can't get out of, I'll move whatever it is. I'll have coffee with them. I'll spend the day with them because that's what somebody did for me. I didn't want to be alone because I was scared of what would happen. You know, I was scared that I would go back out. I was scared that I would be destructive. I was scared that and so I tell them to call me. I'm like, call me. Here's my number. I don't care what time it is. I don't care what day it is. Like, it doesn't matter. I'll always pick up the phone. You don't even have to say anything. Just pick up the phone, because just picking up the phone is the first step in feeling better. Because that phone, it weighs 10,000 pounds. It's like
still does today sometimes.
I know. I know.
Right?
I know. Yeah, it does. And with texting, it's so easy. But I say, just call me. Like, I'll be there. You're always welcome. You're welcome in my home. You're welcome to whatever I have. Because somebody, people were so kind to me and they had arms open. And then I have them meet me at a meeting. I'm like, great. When, let's go to a meeting tomorrow. Do you want to go to a meeting tonight? Do you want to go to another one? Let's look at your calendar. And I'll go to meetings with them. And like, I didn't understand that when I first got sober, is that helped me so much more, like helping another person get sober, helping another person stay sober, or giving somebody, I don't know, directions for a meeting, or like, yeah. And because I remember at the beginning when people asked my phone number, this is like a funny story too to end on, I guess. Like, this woman's like, can I have your phone number? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I don't want to date you. I just want to get coffee with you so you stay sober. It's like 2.5 years. Like, I had like a little bit of, not a ton of time, but I had like a little bit of time. And I was so scared and I was so closed off to everything and everybody. And I'm not today. And that's grateful. And that's by the grace of God. And that's the gift of the program. And that's a gift of putting in a drink and doing the things when I don't want to and having better tools in my toolbox.
All right. So if anybody here wants to get in touch with you, can they do it? Is there any way they can do it? Can they message you somewhere? Where can they message you? I'm
on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I can give you my email.
I'll link them to this. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Either one of those is great. And I'll respond. I'll send you my number. Maybe women in the program, I'm always happy to help. If you're here in DC, Virginia, and Maryland, my gift is to pay it forward. I mean, when they say keep it, we have to give it away to keep it, and I firmly believe that.
Well, you gave it away today. I can't thank you enough, Hilary. This was awesome. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It's all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues on January 20th through the 22nd, 2023. Tickets are on sale now at roguecon23.com.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.